At 5:42 in the morning, my phone rang with a tone that did not belong in the quiet warmth of dawn. I blinked awake, half dreaming, until the voice on the other end spoke words that cut through whatever was left of sleep. She said she was calling to confirm the appraisal appointment for my house, scheduled for Thursday. She said my husband had submitted the request to list the property. She read my address, my name, his name. The heartbeat in my ears was the only sound I could hear. My name is Aubrey Miller. I'm 34 years old, a registered nurse who has worked through holidays, flu seasons, and nights that stretched like eternity. I bought my house with 6 years of exhaustion and sacrifice. When friends went on vacations, I stayed behind and picked up extra shifts. When people my age bought trendy clothes, I wore thrift stores and scrubs. Every dollar I saved was one brick in the foundation of the future I wanted. By 28, the house was mine. By 32, I had paid every last cent. No loans, no cosigner, no one to claim it with me. No one knows that. Not my coworkers, not my neighbors, not me, then my husband. Caleb Rhodes came into my life so gently, I mistook his presence for comfort. Kind eyes, soft words, the kind of man who held doors open and remembered your favorite tea. I thought I had found love. I did not know he had come for what I built. That phone call was the beginning of the unraveling. I did not grow up with safety. I did not grow up with savings. I grew up learning that if I wanted something, I would have to earn it twice as hard and twice as long. When I graduated nursing school, I promised myself one thing. One day, I would have a home where no one could turn me out. No one could take the keys. No one could make me leave. A door I owned, a life I secured. So I worked. I worked like survival depended on it. For 6 years, I picked up night shifts, back-to-back 12-hour rotations, and holidays when others were with their families. On Christmas Eve, I was inserting IV lines. On New Year's Day, I was charting medication doses while fireworks cracked outside the hospital window. I ate microwaved ramen more often than real meals. I skipped brunches, birthdays, weekends at the lake. My friends posted photos of vacations and engagement rings, while I rested blistered feet in a bathtub after 16 hours on my feet. Every shift was a deposit toward the life I wanted. When I finally found the house I knew, it was a small craftsman-style home on a quiet street in Maple Harbor. Blue shutters faded by time, but the bones were strong. Hardwood floors that creaked like memory. A porch that held morning light gently. A backyard where I pictured spring tomatoes and summer sun. The realtor tried to steer me towards something more affordable, but I had run numbers for years. I knew exactly what I could manage. The day I held the keys, my hands shook. I sat on the floor of the empty living room and cried the kind of tears that taste like freedom. For the first time, I belonged somewhere. I was not borrowing space. I was not surviving month to month. This home was the result of every sore muscle, every skipped luxury, every hour no one saw. When the final mortgage payment cleared years later, I whispered to myself, "No one will take this from me." I wish I had known then that someone was already planning to try. I met Caleb Rhodes on a Thursday evening beneath strings of soft lights at a hospital charity gala. He stood near the silent auction table, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed like he had nowhere else to be. I had come straight from a shift, hair pinned back hastily, shoes still imprinting the shape of a 12-hour day. I did not expect romance. I expected a quick evening, a polite appearance, then home to the house I loved more than anything. Caleb reached for the same glass of sparkling cider I did. He smiled warm and unhurried and let me take it first. His voice was low, steady, the kind that could calm a storm inside someone. He asked how long I had worked in nursing. He listened when I answered. He did not talk over me. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details. I was not used to that. He told me he worked in pharmaceutical sales, that he had been divorced for several years, that life had been heavy, but he was rebuilding. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, just stories shaped gently as if to show vulnerability without revealing too much. Vulnerability is a powerful bait when wrapped in sincerity. We talked for nearly 2 hours. I told him about the hospital, about patients I still thought of years later, about how grief clings to you when you are the last voice someone hears. He told me about his mother, Lydia Ward, who he said was overprotective but loving. I laughed at the way he rolled his eyes affectionately. I thought it was sweet. The irony still tastes sharp when I remember it. As we said goodbye, he lightly touched my hand, not possessive, just enough to linger. He asked if he could see me again. I hesitated for 1 second, just one. Something in me whispered caution, quiet and fragile like thread. But I said yes. I wanted to believe good things could finally happen to someone who had spent so long fighting alone. On our first date, he walked me to my porch. He asked who owned the house. Without thinking, I said it belonged to my grandmother and was still tied up in estate matters. The lie fell out clean, barely shaped. It was instinct, pure and unfiltered, and I did not understand its purpose yet. But the moment I spoke it, I felt protected. If he knew it was mine, entirely mine, something inside me said it would not be safe. Looking back now, that whisper was truth. A warning, a hand pulling me away from the fire before I could see the flames. 3 months into the relationship, Caleb told me his mother wanted to meet me. I felt a pinch of nerves, but I tried to quiet it. Meeting a partner's mother was normal, expected. I told myself this was the next step. Yet the morning of that visit, my stomach was tight, my thoughts loud in a way I could not quite interpret. Lydia Ward opened the door before Caleb could knock twice. She was tall, silver-haired, elegant in a way that suggested discipline rather than softness. Her eyes flicked over me quickly, taking inventory, deciding things. She smiled, though nothing about her expression felt warm. She invited us in, and her apartment looked like a magazine spread. White furniture that felt untouchable, glass tables without a fingerprint in sight. Everything arranged as if emotion would disrupt the design. We sat with tea steeped too long, bitter on the tongue. Lydia did not waste time. She asked where I was from, where my parents lived, whether I had siblings, if my job paid well, if I had savings, if I owned property. She did not blink between questions. It felt like paperwork disguised as conversation. When the topic drifted toward my house, she sat forward, alert in a way that made the air feel thin. And then the lie I had told Caleb resurfaced. I said the home belonged to my grandmother, that it was still tied up in estate transfer, nothing final. Something flickered across Lydia's face, quick, sharp, satisfied. She asked which lawyer handled the estate, how long probate had been, whether there were other heirs. Her tone was friendly, but the curiosity was too precise, too targeted. Caleb watched quietly, eyes unreadable, like he was waiting to hear my answer as much as she was. And then I saw it. Just a second, barely formed, a look exchanged between mother and son, small, practiced, familiar. Not love, coordination. I did not understand it at the time. I only felt a cold ripple under my ribs, like instinct tugging at my sleeve. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself meeting his mother should not feel like an assessment, but it did. And for the first time, I wondered what exactly I had let into my life. 5 months after our first date, Caleb proposed. It happened quietly, just us, no audience and no speech rehearsed to perfection. It felt simple and sweet, like a moment I had earned after years of tarrying life alone. I said yes because it felt safe to hope again. I said yes because I wanted love to finally be something I could hold without losing. We married in a small ceremony, no grand venue, no long guest list. I wore a dress bought during a sale I almost talked myself out of. He cried during the vows. I believed every word he promised. Caleb moved into my home the week after the wedding. At first, it felt warm to share space with someone. Coffee for two toothbrushes in the bathroom cup. But slowly, subtly, things shifted. He rearranged furniture, moved decorations, replaced things I had chosen carefully with ones that felt unfamiliar. He never asked, he assumed. Lydia began visiting often, unannounced. She walked through rooms like they belonged to her, tracing her fingers along the mantel, studying corners like she was inspecting inventory. She took quick photos when she thought I wasn't looking. When I asked, she said she loved architecture, that she was simply admiring craftsmanship. But admiration should feel like appreciation. This felt like assessment. More than once, I came home to find Caleb and Lydia speaking in hushed tones that stopped when I entered. They called it harmless conversation. I called it something I could not yet name. I brushed away the unease, tucked it under reason, told myself marriage requires adjustment. I wanted to believe discomfort was normal, that love could smooth over sharp edges. But the house began to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a structure shifting under pressure I could not locate. And though I did not know it, the walls of my life were already tilting. The morning it all cracked open was a Tuesday. I had finished a double shift the night earlier, fell asleep still wearing my socks, body heavy from exhaustion. When my phone rang at 5:42 a.m., I reached for it blindly, expecting a wrong number or a scheduling update from work. But the woman on the call spoke with confidence. She asked for me by full name. She confirmed the address of my home. She said her company would be arriving Thursday morning to do an appraisal before listing the property for sale. Then she paused and asked if my husband would be present, since he was the one who submitted the request. I went cold. My husband? My house? My signature? Nowhere. I sat up, breath uneven. My voice came out thin when I told her I'd never made any request. She hesitated, surprised. She said a power of attorney had been uploaded, authorizing Caleb Rhodes to act on behalf of the estate. She used the word estate, the same lie I'd told months ago, the lie he believed, the lie someone else had decided to weaponize. I ended the call politely because habit teaches you how to stay calm even when your world tilts. Caleb was asleep beside me, breathing deep and slow like his conscience was clean. I stared at the back of his shoulder the way I used to rest my head there and feel safe. I felt nothing now, nothing but numbness and a rising awareness, like floodwater rising inch by inch. I walked quietly to the bathroom and locked the door. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on the edge of the tub. The room seemed smaller, closer, like the air was running out. My husband tried to sell my house, the one I bled years into, the one I hid to protect. Who signs a power of attorney without the owner's knowledge? Someone planning to take everything. I called the only person I trusted fully, the one who knew me before any of this existed, Jade Walker. When she answered, half asleep, she asked what was wrong. I told her everything, the appraisal, the forged authority, the estate lie coming back to choke me. Jade went silent, then spoke with the clarity I needed. Do not confront him yet. Do not let him see your panic. Let me dig. Give me 48 hours. 48 hours felt like a lifetime. But I agreed, because when a crack appears, light gets in, and this crack was just the beginning. Jade called me back the next evening, her voice tight like she had been holding her breath for hours. She told me to sit down. I did. My heart already knew she would confirm what I feared, but nothing prepared me for this scale of it. Caleb Rhodes had been married before. Not once, not twice, 3 times. His first wife owned a townhouse inherited from her father, sold within a year. She filed suit, but paperwork vanished, signatures were questioned, evidence dissolved. She lost. The second wife had a lake house, same pattern: marriage, sale, divorce, disappearance of funds. She was left with nothing but debt, and a judge who said lack of proof tied the court's hands. The third wife was the most chilling. She bought her own home before marriage, just like I did. Caleb attempted to refinance it without her knowledge. She discovered it early, but still lost half the property value and litigation she couldn't afford to continue. And Lydia Ward? Jade found what I had not even known to look for: a revoked real estate license, charges related to forged documents and fraudulent transfer, probation first, then prison time, 2 years served, a career built not on selling homes, but on stealing them. Their past was not tragedy, it was strategy. I listened while Jade spoke, quiet, unmoving, as if stillness could slow the reality crashing through me. I pictured Caleb laughing in my kitchen, Lydia admiring the crown molding, their eyes measuring walls like currency. They had done this before. They were doing it again. I was next in a line of women who loved and lost to hands disguised as gentle. For a moment, grief washed through me. Not for the house, not even for the betrayal, but for the version of myself who said yes, believing she was safe. The woman who dreamed in warm colors, the woman who trusted. Then the grief hardened, became focus, became steel. I was not going to be the fourth ghost in their financial graveyard. I was going to be the one who stopped them. The morning after Jade laid bare the truth, I made an appointment with a man whose name she whispered like a lifeline, Marcus Hale, a lawyer who had spent his career dismantling real estate fraud schemes, just like the one tightening around my throat. When I sat across from him, I felt as if my life was an open file on his desk. I told him everything, the lie about the house, the sudden proposal, Lydia's questions, the appraisal call, 3 ex-wives. His pen barely stopped moving. When I finished, he looked at me with a stillness that was more powerful than shock. You have been marked as an asset, not a partner. It was the blunt truth I needed. Marcus laid out a plan with the precision of a surgeon. I was not to confront Caleb or Lydia. I was not to change my behavior. I would continue smiling, cooking dinner, playing wife, while we built a case stone by stone. He told me to install small cameras in the house, nothing obvious, nothing detectable. One in the living room bookshelf, one above the kitchen cabinet, one near the office file drawers. Then he leaned forward and told me what changed everything. Check his devices, every message, every email, every file. That night, after Caleb fell asleep, I sat on the couch with the shared tablet he rarely used publicly. The screen unlocked easily, no suspicion, no caution, as if he believed I would never look. Folders opened like wounds. There were emails between Caleb and Lydia mapping out the timing of their next acquisition. My name was a bullet point. My house was described as liquid potential. They discussed forged signatures, probate loopholes, how soon after the sale they could file for divorce without raising flags. They even noted how to keep me compliant emotionally. Flowers, care, softness until the house was gone. I screenshotted everything, sent copies to Jade, sent copies to Marcus, saved files in 3 encrypted drives, evidence layered like armor. I backed up every detail because men who steal houses for a living know how to erase footprints. But this time, they were not hunting a victim. They were walking into a trap they could not see. We worked silently, patiently. I moved through the house like anyone would move through a marriage that still looked whole on the outside. I brewed Caleb's coffee each morning. I folded his shirts, tucked them into drawers he had claimed like the home was already his. I answered Lydia's polite messages with polite replies of my own. I was the image of a devoted wife, and they believed it. That was the advantage they did not see coming. They underestimated me. 3 nights after I found the emails, Lydia arrived while I pretended to be asleep upstairs. The camera on the bookshelf recorded her entering the office, flipping through my files, photographing the deed she believed still belonged to my grandmother. She looked comfortable, confident enough to snoop without fear. When Caleb returned from work, the camera above the pantry caught them whispering about timelines, about selling before I became suspicious. I watched the footage later with a stillness I knew was no longer shock, but strategy. Marcus said one sentence that rewrote the path forward. We do not stop them by running, we stop them by letting them walk into court themselves. I knew what I had to do next. The morning after Jade laid bare the truth, I made an appointment with a man whose name she whispered like a lifeline, Marcus Hale, a lawyer who had spent his career dismantling real estate fraud schemes, just like the one tightening around my throat. When I sat across from him, I felt as if my life was an open file on his desk. I told him everything, the lie about the house, the sudden proposal, Lydia's questions, the appraisal call, 3 ex-wives. His pen barely stopped moving. When I finished, he looked at me with a stillness that was more powerful than shock. You have been marked as an asset, not a partner. It was the blunt truth I needed. Marcus laid out a plan with the precision of a surgeon. I was not to confront Caleb or Lydia. I was not to change my behavior. I would continue smiling, cooking dinner, playing wife, while we built a case stone by stone. He told me to install small cameras in the house, nothing obvious, nothing detectable. One in the living room bookshelf, one above the kitchen cabinet, one near the office file drawers. Then he leaned forward and told me what changed everything. Check his devices, every message, every email, every file. That night, after Caleb fell asleep, I sat on the couch with the shared tablet he rarely used publicly. The screen unlocked easily, no suspicion, no caution, as if he believed I would never look. Folders opened like wounds. There were emails between Caleb and Lydia mapping out the timing of their next acquisition. My name was a bullet point. My house was described as liquid potential. They discussed forged signatures, probate loopholes, how soon after the sale they could file for divorce without raising flags. They even noted how to keep me compliant emotionally. Flowers, care, softness until the house was gone. I screenshotted everything, sent copies to Jade, sent copies to Marcus, saved files in 3 encrypted drives, evidence layered like armor. I backed up every detail because men who steal houses for a living know how to erase footprints. But this time, they were not hunting a victim. They were walking into a trap they could not see. We worked silently, patiently. I moved through the house like anyone would move through a marriage that still looked whole on the outside. I brewed Caleb's coffee each morning. I folded his shirts, tucked them into drawers he had claimed like the home was already his. I answered Lydia's polite messages with polite replies of my own. I was the image of a devoted wife, and they believed it. That was the advantage they did not see coming. They underestimated me. 3 nights after I found the emails, Lydia arrived while I pretended to be asleep upstairs. The camera on the bookshelf recorded her entering the office, flipping through my files, photographing the deed she believed still belonged to my grandmother. She looked comfortable, confident enough to snoop without fear. When Caleb returned from work, the camera above the pantry caught them whispering about timelines, about selling before I became suspicious. I watched the footage later with a stillness I knew was no longer shock, but strategy. Marcus said one sentence that rewrote the path forward. We do not stop them by running. We stop them by letting them walk into court themselves. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I leaned casually across the counter, stirring sugar into my coffee, and told Caleb that I had received a call from the estate attorney. I said the paperwork had finally moved forward, that a meeting was scheduled to finalize the property transfer to my name the following Wednesday at 2 p.m. I let my voice tremble just enough to sound overwhelmed, grateful, naive. Caleb's eyes flickered hope, greed, hidden beneath sympathy. He said he would come to support me. He added that Lydia should attend too, since she understood real estate better. His eagerness was so sharp it almost glinted. He texted Lydia within the hour. The camera caught him telling her the plan was back on track. They discussed documents she would bring for me to sign quietly during the meeting. They rehearsed how to phrase things so I would not think twice. They did not know that every word was being saved, copied, archived. I was no longer protecting a house. I was preparing to take back a future. Wednesday arrived with a kind of silence that felt like the air before a storm. I woke early, not out of fear, but focus. I showered, dressed, and looked in the mirror at a woman who was no longer unaware, no longer unguarded. I wore something neutral, something professional, nothing bold enough to suggest control, but not weak enough to suggest surrender. Caleb made breakfast like any ordinary morning. He kissed my cheek. He asked if I was nervous about the meeting. I smiled softly, the way one does when they are pretending not to break. Inside, I was no longer breaking. I was calculating. We drove together to the office appointed for the supposed property transfer. Lydia met us in the parking lot, dressed in calm authority, carrying a folder I recognized without opening. Inside were the documents meant to remove me from ownership of my own home. She greeted me warmly, too warmly, her hand light on my back like she was guiding me into destiny. We walked into the conference room, and everything stopped. Caleb took one step inside and froze. Lydia too, because seated at the table were not estate lawyers, not notaries, not anyone they prepared for. Instead, waiting calmly, were Marcus Hale, 2 investigators from the fraud division, and 3 women I had never met but knew instantly. The previous wives, women who had learned too late, women whose hands once held deeds that vanished into paper ghosts. There was no raised voice, no dramatic reveal, just evidence laid neatly on the table, like a truth finally allowed to breathe. When Caleb turned to me, his face carried disbelief, then anger, then something like recognition. Lydia's voice came sharp, asking what game I was playing. But investigators already had the footage, the emails, the documents, the record of their conversations, the timeline of their intent. They were not being accused, they were being proven. Handcuffs clicked quietly, almost anticlimactic against months of deception. Caleb said my name once, but I did not look at him. Lydia called me foolish, but the words did not touch me. They were walked out past me, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed without weight on my lungs. They had stepped into this room expecting to take everything. Instead, they lost everything they came for. The court process moves slower than the moment of their arrest, but justice has its own rhythm. It does not rush, it does not forget. It builds like a tide, steady and inevitable. Caleb attempted to negotiate, then deny, then blame. Lydia claimed misunderstanding, accidental signatures, confusion about ownership, but evidence is not moved by pleading, and truth does not bend for convenience. The footage showed Lydia rifling through my files. The emails mapped out their strategy with timestamps and attachments. The appraisal request was traced back to Caleb's verified authorization. 3 ex-wives submitted statements, each detail reinforcing the pattern like identical footprints in wet cement. Their history was no longer rumor, it was record. In the end, Caleb accepted a plea deal for fraud, forgery, and attempted unlawful transfer of property. Lydia faced a longer sentence due to her prior conviction and directly documented involvement. When the judge read the verdict, I did not cheer. I did not smile. Justice enjoyed its release, a door closing so another can finally open. The divorce followed quietly. No fight, no negotiation. He had nothing left to claim. I changed the locks the same day. New keys felt like new breath in my lungs. My home was mine again, not because I earned it, but because I defended it. Women like me are not meant to be prey. And I knew now that survival is not just about building a life, it is about protecting it. In the months that followed, my house felt different. Not haunted, not damaged, just quiet. Walls remember, but they also forgive. I repainted the living room, sanded the porch railings myself, planted tomatoes in the backyard like I once imagined all those years ago. There was healing in small tasks, in tending soil, in claiming space one touch at a time. Every hammer strike felt like I was rebuilding more than wood. It was rebuilding me. I met with the 3 women Caleb once loved and left with nothing. We didn't meet as victims, but as survivors, bonded not by loss, but by understanding. We shared stories, compared scars, drank coffee in kitchens where no one hid intentions behind tenderness. We laughed loud, unguarded, because we were not broken. We were still here. At Marcus Hale's suggestion, I spoke to a local support group for women facing financial manipulation. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as faces lifted. Listening, I told them what I wish someone had told me early on. Your instincts are data, not doubt. Your boundaries are not cruelty. Protecting what you've built is not selfish. It is sacred. 1 year later, I started a small program helping women learn how to safeguard property, recognize legal red flags, and trust themselves before trusting someone else. I named it Stonehouse, after the thing I fought to keep. It grew slowly, beautifully, like something nurtured instead of taken. When I sit on my porch now, morning light pulling across the wood, I think about the call that almost ended everything. I think about how close I came to losing the life I worked for, and then I breathe deeper because I didn't. If this story reaches even one woman who needs it, if it keeps one home protected, one heart aware, then it was worth telling. If you found something in my story, share it with someone who might need it. Leave a comment, leave a voice. Sometimes that is how we save each other. We listen, we speak, we protect what is ours.